turn it on.
Done. Right on? You okay? Thank you. Right, I'll start again. I looked at the history of Southeast Wales, and I started looking at it casually as a hobby, you know, things to do on a winter weekend and so on, because I didn't believe anything I'd ever been told about it in school. It's a neglected area, a neglected subject, and I've later found out that it's a forbidden subject. One does not look into the history of Southeast Wales. It's very strange because it's the best recorded and most detailed recorded in the whole of Europe. And it's the best backed up by physical evidence. By that I mean Dark Age inscribed stones with people's names on, names of kings and princes and what they do. There are over 200 in Wales. Named battlefields with big grave mounds of the dead, all the names around the place, sorting things out. Ancient churches going back to the dawn of the Christian era, ancient manors and forts and heaven knows what. And a massive record in different forms, lives of saints, genealogies of saints, the genealogies of the kings, the written histories, historical poetry, the triads, everything sort of interlocking. Charters of the land of cathedral, going back to about the year 400, on to about 1100, abbey charters and so on. And the charters are important because the king gives the charter to the church, and all the princes and his family line up and sign as well, and his brother the bishop or his son the bishop and all the leading clergy do the same. So you've got a who's who down the centuries. And everything seems to interlock and to fit together. What seems to have happened is this. The British claim two places of origin. They claim a migration coming in from Syria. And the Syrian migration obviously is a very early one. It takes place around 1600 BC, right? Now, if that is correct, there is a Syrian population moving into Britain at the dawn of the Bronze Age. The reason for moving into Britain is very clear. If you've got tin, you can make bronze. You have bronze weapons, which are infinitely superior to copper weapons. So it seems to be militaristic. At the same time as this invasion is said to take place, a vast explosion took place in Britain of what they call the Wessex culture. Marvellous metalworking emerged everywhere. They find it in ancient tombs and mounds and God knows where. And it has no sort of base, no pedigree. It seems to come out of the blue, out of nowhere. The second migration takes place around 500 BC. And it's said to come from Troy, and the British have always claimed to be Trojans. And this was happily accepted until the beginning of the 19th century. Then people in Oxford had bright ideas, and they said, hang about a minute, Troy is a fiction. It never existed other than in the mind of Homer. And if Troy is a complete fiction, the history of a people who claim to be descended from Troy has also to be a fiction. So you have to get rid of this history and throw it out. And an onslaught developed on this history. People ran about making huge reputations, say, I have disproved this manuscript, and I have disproved that manuscript. Of course, they hadn't disproved anything. What they're really inviting us to believe is that for about 1200 years, several thousand writers, bards, monks, historians, all combined together over 1200 years, spread over about 30,000 square miles of territory, to produce a vast, interlocking, totally credible forgery, which would fill a library, and does. And they backed this forgery up with skeletons in stone coffins, with inscribed tombstones that are known to be 1600, even 1700 in some cases, years old. They backed it up with battlefields, with graves with thousands of dead in, etc. In other words, something has gone wrong. So my colleague and I finally decided we'd look into this properly and in some detail. Now, the way to go about it, we decided, was to see if we could track back on the migration stories. Now, there is in South Wales an ancient alphabet known as the Coelbren. Now, generally, it was written on wood. They made a wooden frame, put triangular slats of wood across, and they cut into the slips of wood with a little axe or a knife. So obviously the entire alphabet is a straight stroke alphabet. Can't have any curves. It had the advantages that even if your sight was going or you were in the dark, you could read it. It's like a braille. This has been noted. Again, when they threw the general history out and said, all this history is a big forgery, they also decided that the Coelbren alphabet was a big forgery. So out of the window went the alphabet, or the theory of the alphabet. The idea developed that it had been invented around the year 1800, which is remarkable really, because there are books of 1580 and earlier, and 1520, exhibiting the Coelbren alphabet. And I don't want to bore you too much with that, but I can assure you that the proof is enormous. So what we were doing was something against the trend with academia. The academics were in one direction and we were tending to go in the other. We found that there were Coelbren inscribed stones in Wales, they were in England, dug up in London, they were in the north of England, they were in Scotland, all over the place. And so we decided that if they were the Welsh alphabet, and a man named Llewellyn Sion had preserved the cipher to the alphabet in 1560, then we would know which sign was A, B, C, D, E. Therefore, if we had an inscription, all we had to do was look at the sign, place the appropriate letter underneath, and if we went along the inscription, we should come out with a word. And this is what happened. And so we had Welsh words. And for an English person, all you have to do is look up the word in the dictionary, and if you've got an English-Welsh dictionary, which is easy to acquire, and lo and behold, you can read what's on the stone. Some of the first we did, one was of a stone known to have been erected around 950, and it said Higuel Rex. Well, Higuel Rex in all the manuscripts is Higuel Rex, and he's Howell the Good, who died in 948. And his grave mound is about 3 miles from this stone, and his court is about 6 miles off. What's left of his court is Upper Court Farm and Lower Court Farm. We found another one, had a floral cross on the top, figure of a man below, carrying a sword in one hand, scepter in the other, his inscription below. It said, Godufan the Exile. We looked up the records. Godufan the Exile is there. It says, Godufan was a turbulent, mad and wild king, for which reason he was deposed and exiled, and his brother Hrun placed in his stead. And this proved to be the pattern right around Britain. Everywhere we looked, we found a stone, we could read it, and it always had some correct historical credibility. So we were encouraged to think that we now were on something of a winner. We then found that there were even books in the Welsh National Library wholly written in Coelbren. Some of them of 6th century poems and so on. So the idea that it was a forgery was rapidly going right out of the window. What we then decided to do was to check back on the migration legends. How's this thing? Have I got the right end of this, Jim? Shake it a little. It works if you shake it, does it? Yeah. The migration legend, the second one that we took, started here. And the people journeyed around here, and they actually stopped off in Spain, picked up 3 groups of their countrymen, went on to the UK. Okay? We also noted that coming out of here, Troy, about 100 years before this, the Etruscans had moved out of the area, and they'd moved into Italy and set up the Etruscan Empire. So it seemed to us possible that we'd have an alphabet in Britain, possibly here, probably here, and here. Because if these people moved, it's highly likely that they took the language with them and their alphabet with them. And we also knew that Pliny the Elder had said that the Rhaetians up in Switzerland, around here, were Etruscans who had moved north. So there was a chance there. What we then found was that there were a massive inscriptions here, there were a massive array of inscriptions here, some up here, and quite a few over here. And they all appeared to be in the same alphabet. Now somebody had anticipated this. A man named John Williams of Oxford in 1846 had said, isn't it strange that we find this Coelbren Welsh alphabet all over Etruria, the Etruscan Empire, and all over Phrygia in Turkey? Of course, he didn't say it too loudly. He published it because, again, he's swimming against the tide. Everybody's saying this history's terrible, it's all forged, it's no good, don't look at it. And he's looking at it. So we began to try to translate the inscriptions in Etruria. And logically, we started off with bronze mirrors that only have 1 or 2 words on them. No problem there, they were reading out. There's a fellow leaning over an altar, carving something up, and it says sacrifice, things like that. And we started looking at little longer things, little inscriptions on jugs, wine jars, things like that, on the statue where there's a gladiator looking awfully sad with all his armour broken up, and the goddess has got an arm around him, And it says that how he's fallen down and has passed over. That is the traditional word for dying, and he's seeking refuge and succor from the goddess. So we then knew we could read Etruscan. We tackled the largest inscriptions we could find and are known in Etruria. One is the Perugia Keepus, about 36 lines of writing. Another one is the Persi tablets, 3 gold tablets, 1 in Carthaginian, Punic, and 2 in Etruscan. And they were found at the port of Carrara near Rome there. And they told a credible story. They told of a league, apparently between Carthage and Etruria. Carthage is here, Etruria here. And what had happened is that when Cyrus, the emperor of Persia, got on the throne about 546 BC, he sent his general Harpagus along the coast here, and Harpagus' job was to clean up all the Greek cities, and most of them submitted. And he came to the Phocaeans and he said, look, knock down 1 tower of your wall, give us 1 house in the city for the emperor, and everything will be all right. They said, give us 24 hours to think it over. So he said, fine. Next morning he came along with his army, and he found that the entire town had taken to the ships with all their women, children, everything they could carry, and had gone away. The Phocaeans sailed away, tried to get land here, couldn't get it, came round to Sardinia. And they thought it'd be a very good idea to set up as pirates. So they set up as pirates, and they traded on preying on the Etruscan fleets here and the Carthaginian fleet, the merchant fleet. So a league was formed between Carthage and Etruria to provide 60 ships each, a war fleet, to track down these Phocaeans and destroy them, which they did. And the Phocaeans were driven out of there, and they finished up here in Sicily. But that's what these tablets tell you in Welsh. I'm calling it Welsh because it's probably Cumbric, right? We tackled the Agnone tablet from the Adriatic coast, which told of the origin of these people, how they come to be in Etruria. I'll tell you that later, if you like. So we're fairly confident we could deal with this. We tackled the Furaidian inscriptions, and they work out as well, no problem. So we then moved further back in time, and we got over to Turkey, tackled some of the inscriptions there. Primarily, the longest one we could get our hands on was the inscription over the supposed tomb of Midas, and that turns out to translate perfectly, logically, very well in the same technique, reading in the same language. So what we've got is a language coming from the east to the west, dying out in the east, dying out in Etruria, which is known to have died out there. And if you read Pliny and others, they'll say how Etruscan is totally different from Latin. There's no comparison, it's totally different from Greek. So it died out in the Mediterranean areas, but it's been preserved around there in Wales. This is the situation we have. This is the background then, against which we're working when we get an approach from Jim Michael. And he says to us, can you assist us? Do you know what this alphabet might be? And we say, yeah, sure. We know what it is. So while he's pressurizing us to sort of look west, we're saying to him, go away. We're going east. We're having to do a roots exercise. You think we're going backwards. And we've gone a lot further. Won't bore you with it. But we've got back to about 2000 BC. And all of it seems to fit in with the known histories. Whatever. Okay? When